Something extraordinary is happening inside the Labour Party, and it's not coming from the opposition benches, it's coming from within. For the first time, one of Starmer's own MPs has broken ranks, risking everything to expose a policy so cold, so cruel, that even his colleagues are struggling to defend it. This isn't just politics, it's a moral breaking point. The mask of unity is slipping, and what's underneath is far uglier than anyone imagined. Tonight, we're not watching a government under attack. We're watching a conscience fight for survival and the Labour Party crumble from the inside.
You're saying that you're going to vote against the government. Is that the first time that you will have rebelled?
Keir Starmer's leadership is beginning to show visible fractures, not because of Conservative pressure, nor due to a media scandal, but from within his own party. Labour's internal unity is breaking down, and it's happening in full view of the public. At the centre of the controversy is Starmer's plan to cut support for disabled people, a policy he defends as a necessary step toward fiscal balance. But for many in his party, it crosses a moral line. One Labour MP, speaking with striking candour, called it not a rebellion, but a reckoning. Even some of Starmer's most loyal allies are finding it difficult to justify what critics describe as a policy of cruelty disguised as economic responsibility. What unfolded wasn't just a heated debate. It was a moment of reckoning for a leader accused of abandoning Labour's core values.
Getting the benefits bill down is something that is a big pressure for Rachel Reeves as the Chancellor, also for Liz Kendall, who is the Work and Pension Secretary, and for the government more generally. Your name wasn't on this letter. What are your thoughts in regard to its sentiments, Jonathan?
I agree with them.
You agree with them? Are you going to rebel?
I do. I'll be very clear. When these cuts were announced, I spoke locally with my party and said I couldn't envisage myself voting for those cuts. I think we've got to be, and I don't intend to.
You can see it in his expression. Jonathan Brash is visibly uneasy. It's not that he's unsure of what to say, it's that saying it aloud carries a weight that's almost unbearable. In that moment, he isn't merely challenging an economic policy, he's confronting what he believes to be a moral failure at the heart of his own party. His pauses, his hesitations aren't signs of confusion, they're signs of conviction clashing with conscience. Because deep down, Brash knows what this debate truly represents. It's not about numbers on a balance sheet, it's about the price of compassion in modern Labour politics. This wasn't rebellion, it was resistance, quiet, human, and deeply personal. When rejecting cruelty becomes an act of courage, it says something profound about how far a movement has drifted from its founding values. Labour once prided itself on empathy and social justice. Today, it risks looking more like a machine, efficient, strategic, but cold. Brash's discomfort isn't performance, it's a reflection of that loss. He's not grandstanding, he's simply trying to hold on to his integrity in a moment when doing so feels like defiance. And that, perhaps, is the most telling part of all, that a Labour MP now needs courage just to say that cruelty is wrong.
So much of what is in that green paper is absolutely right. We have to reduce the benefit bill in this country. We have to get people back into work. Work is absolutely the right place for people to be. And I think we've gone through a generation where the benefit bill has skyrocketed. But cutting support for disabled people doesn't solve that problem. That is about balancing the books. That's about making the numbers stack up for fiscal rules and everything else. I have spoken to countless people in Hartlepool, people who actually are in work but rely on PIP in order to support them to do it, who are going to lose under this system. I have spoken to people who are anxious and they are scared and they do not know what the future holds if this goes ahead. I think we have to be absolutely clear. Yes, we want to get people back into work. That is absolutely right. And by the way, there are people out there who should work and could work and don't want to work. And that's also a massive problem that we have to solve. But simply piling on pain to those in desperate need is not a way.
Jonathan Brash isn't merely delivering a speech, he's standing alone in the eye of a moral storm. He knows the risks, the backlash, and the cost of saying aloud what so many within Labour only dare whisper in private. Yet he speaks not for political gain, not for headlines, but out of conviction. Because deep down, he still remembers what the Labour Party once stood for. While others hide behind scripted lines and polished sound bites, Brash is doing something rare in modern politics. He's telling the truth. Not a convenient truth, but a painful one. Because let's be clear, this isn't reform. It's cruelty disguised as fiscal responsibility. The notion that you can lift people up by stripping away the very support they rely on is not just misguided, it's grotesque. And Jonathan Brash refuses to stay silent about it. Before we continue, if you value in-depth political analysis and want more honest breakdowns of what's really happening in Westminster, don't forget to like this video, share it and subscribe. Now, let's get back to the story.
They're the main pain ones for me. Diabetes, blood pressure, then we've got the statin.
Kevin has been unable to work since he fractured his back and doctors discovered a benign tumour next to his spine.
It's like someone booting you in the back. And your legs are just that boiling water feeling, it's just constant flow and pain down the back of your leg.
Do you want to work?
You want to work, but you can't, you're not able to work. You're not living, you're just existing at the moment, and it's hard. I've just been existing for the last few years, and because I can't.
Jonathan Brash isn't calling for defiance, he's calling for decency. His message is simple but deeply resonant. Progress should never come at the expense of compassion. He acknowledges that work matters, that supporting people into employment is vital. But he also makes a crucial point. You cannot build a fair society by punishing those already struggling just to stay afloat. He's speaking for those who rely on support not to avoid responsibility, but to meet it people trying to live with dignity, contribute where they can, and hold their lives together despite immense challenges. Now, those same people are being told that their reward for perseverance is to lose what little stability they have left. Brash isn't rejecting progress or hard work. In fact, what he's doing requires extraordinary courage, confronting the widening gap between political rhetoric and lived reality. While many in Westminster turn away or deny that gap exists, he's facing it directly. This isn't about sound bites or political theatre. It's about integrity, about standing firm when doing the right thing isn't easy or popular. In a party increasingly defined by calculation and caution, Brash's stance feels almost radical, because in an era where politics often rewards ambition over empathy, Jonathan Brash is reminding Britain of something that should never have gone out of style: basic human decency.
Said that it would push 250,000 people into poverty, including 50,000 children. I did not get into politics to do that. So absolutely the sentiment of that Green Paper about getting people back into work is right. Getting people off benefits is right. But simply cutting support for people who are disabled is not the way to achieve it. I would argue it probably makes it less likely that some of those people will get into work.
So just to be clear, Jonathan Brash, Labour MP for Hartlepool, you're saying this morning for the first time that you're going to vote against the government.
Jonathan Brash isn't performing for the cameras. He's not chasing headlines or crafting sound bites. What we're witnessing is something far rarer in modern politics: sincerity. He's speaking from conviction, not calculation, because for him, this isn't what public service is meant to be. Politics, at its core, should be about improving lives, not designing policies that make survival harder for those already on the edge. Brash understands that these decisions don't strengthen the economy, don't uplift communities, and certainly don't serve the people most affected. You can hear it in his tone, steady but heavy with truth. This isn't a scripted objection or a strategic stance. It's an instinctive refusal to be complicit in something he knows is fundamentally wrong.
What is your message to Keir Starmer on this, and what presumably your whip and the person who deals with party discipline within Labour is going to give you a ring about this? You're presumably going to have very similar sentiments to what you've just said to me a moment ago.
Yeah, look, my view is that I would urge the government to rethink, to have a look at this again.
Do you think they will?
I sincerely hope they will. One of the things that frustrates me enormously sometimes about politics is that reassessing your position, changing your position is seen as a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of strength. Looking again, change circumstances, to change position, thinking about what you're doing and whether it's the right course of action and potentially correcting that course of action is a sign of strength. Yes, you'll get political commentators who'll scream U-turn, but who cares? This is about doing the right thing. And there are people right now in my constituency and constituencies right across this country that are worried, they're scared, they're anxious, and they're potentially going to be pushed into poverty by these specific changes around personal independence payments. I think we should rethink that. But I reiterate, the overall aim of the government and the Green Paper to get people back into work and the support they want to put in place to make that happen is absolutely correct. That's why it's so frustrating to me, because I support so much of what's in that.
This is a man holding on to the last thread of belief that his party hasn't completely lost its way. Jonathan Brash still hopes faintly that someone close to Keir Starmer might pause, take a hard look at the evidence, the consequences, and the human cost, and decide to change course. He isn't opposing for opposition's sake. He's appealing for reflection, for humility, for decency. Yet, behind the restraint, there's a grim understanding. The leadership isn't listening, because this is not a Labour Party that encourages thought. It demands obedience. Starmer's Labour doesn't nurture conscience. It disciplines it. It doesn't engage in open debate. It recites approved talking points. And when things begin to unravel, it doesn't self-correct. It digs in, regardless of the fallout. Brash's tone may be calm, his language careful, but beneath it lies something unmistakable, quiet fury. You can hear it between the lines. He's not merely addressing his colleagues. He's issuing a warning. If Labour continues down this path, if it keeps calling cruelty reform, it won't just forfeit public trust, it will forfeit the moral authority that once defined it. And that's what gives his words such force. Brash isn't an outsider hurling criticism from the sidelines. He's one of their own, or at least he was. But it's clear he's reaching his limit. When he calls for the party to rethink, it's not advice, it's an indictment. An indictment of Keir Starmer himself, the man who traded conviction for control, promises for power. What Brash is asking for isn't complicated. He's asking for humanity. He's reminding his party that leadership isn't measured by how tightly you hold the reins, but by how much compassion you're willing to show.
But the specific cuts to personal independence payments are not about getting people back into work. They are simply about saving money. And I don't think we should be saving money on the backs of disabled people.
This will be the first time you've rebelled.
Jonathan Brash has dropped the mask, and it's a moment that may well haunt Keir Starmer for the rest of his political career. Labour is attempting to present these welfare cuts as a form of empowerment, a path to opportunity. But Brash sees through it. To him, this isn't genuine reform. It's political sleight of hand, a budget manoeuvre dressed up as social policy. This isn't about inclusion. It isn't about progress. It's about optics, about convincing the markets that Labour can be just as ruthless as the Conservatives when it comes to tightening the purse strings. And the cost of that strategy. It's borne by the same people Labour once promised to protect disabled citizens, low-paid workers, families already struggling to survive. They're not being supported, they're being showcased, used as props in Starmer's pursuit of economic credibility. But Brash isn't playing along. More than most within the party, he refuses to applaud the performance. And that, in itself, is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of integrity.
You regret voting for the winter fuel allowance cut? Should you have rebelled on that?
It's a complicated one because I've said to you before, Peter, I absolutely agree with the principle of means testing. There's no way, for instance, my parents who are perfectly well off should be receiving a state handout with their heating bills. But as I've always said, I thought the threshold was too low. If I'm honest with you, maybe I can probably put my hand on my heart and say that maybe I shouldn't have voted for it at the time. It's something I think about most days, to be perfectly honest. What I said at the time when I voted for it, is that I thought the government needed to look very closely at the threshold and raise it significantly. It's what I believed then, still what I believe.
These are the words of a man haunted by his own decisions. Jonathan Brash knows exactly what he did. He voted for a policy that hurt people. And now he admits he might do it again if nothing changes. The most striking moment comes when he says, "I think about it most days." That single line cuts through the noise, revealing the quiet, personal reckoning that follows when conscience collides with party loyalty. Because this isn't just about politics, it's about the cost to one's integrity. It's about what happens when a movement built on principle begins to erode its own moral foundations. That's the true cost of Starmerism, not only in policy, but in the corrosion of ethics. Brash's stand does more than challenge a decision. It exposes a Labour Party so fearful of appearing weak that it's now competing with the Conservatives over who can be tougher on the most vulnerable. It lays bare a leadership that punishes compassion, suppresses conscience, and prizes loyalty above morality. This isn't leadership, it's moral decay, dressed up as discipline. And the question now is simple. Will others in Labour find the courage to follow Brash's lead? And will Keir Starmer finally listen before the damage becomes irreversible?